Hey. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in tonight. Sorry, running a little late there. Um, the dog had to do her business before I could get started here, so I had to go on a little walk and I got back a little late. Regardless, here we are, like we are. Every Monday night, 7 o'clock. My name's Jason Priester of the Clemson Insider. I want to thank our sponsors, A-Glass, 2 locations in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. Get yourself a free quote online, myaglass.com. Been in the glass business for a long time. All your auto glass needs. They do replacement, repair. Give them a holler. A-Glass. It's that time. And after a weekend off, it's time. Well, it's almost time for Clemson to head over to Austin. First round of the playoff, back in the playoff for the first time since 2020. A 3-year absence. You can talk about how they got there all you want. All you want is opportunity, and they have the opportunity. They are the only 3-loss team in the playoff. One of the biggest things I hated about the playoff expanding to 12 teams was the fact that it was going to allow a 3-loss team into the playoff. And lo and behold, it's Clemson, who is the first 3-loss team. Be that as it may, Clemson, Texas, 12 seed, 5 seed. You could probably make the argument Clemson deserved the 11 seed. They beat SMU. SMU still got the 11 seed somehow. But who do you want to face? Penn State, Texas, up there in that frigid air in Happy Valley. What is, I think, supposed to be frigid air up there in Happy Valley. I think there was snow on the ground yesterday. Probably rather play Texas. It's going to be a tough challenge. You look at Texas's defense, man, and you probably just look at those numbers and you're saying, good Lord, how's Clemson's going to win this game? I think they've allowed 4 touchdown passes all year. Their defense ranks right up there at the top in almost every statistical category. But then you go and look at who they played, or the offenses they played. It's not like they've been playing these elite level offenses week in and week out, stacking up, these numbers against the best of the best. They were able to avoid, outside of Georgia, they were able to avoid most of the better teams in the SEC this year. So some of that might be a little bit misleading, but at the same time, I don't care who you put those numbers up against. It's impressive. And if you're Clemson, you're going there with your starting running back banged up, backup running back out, 2 more backs behind them that you already know the staff does not have a lot of faith in. Otherwise, you'd have seen them more this year. Heck, one of them's redshirting. And then you got Jarvis Green, too. Same thing as Keith Adams. The staff does not have a lot of faith in those guys. Otherwise, you'd have seen more of them this year. And I think Keith Adams, we talked about it last week, I think Keith Adams showed you in the ACC championship game why the staff doesn't have a lot of faith in him. We'll see how much we see of either of those guys or any other 3. I got a feeling it's probably still going to be Maffa, more so than anybody else. Just think that's who they trust with the pass protection, and that those are important things. And I don't care who you put back there. You're probably not going to run for a bunch of yards anyways, not against that defense. Just makes Cade's legs that much more important. He's going to have to make an impact with his legs, a significant impact. I think I said last week I'd like to see him run at least 15 times. And you're going to have those wide receivers win some one-on-one battles down the field. Kind of similar to what they did against SMU in the first half. You need to see more of that, and you're going to need to see that defense play the way it did against Louisville, play the way it did against Pitt in the first half, play the way it did against SMU for 2.5 quarters, 3 quarters. You gotta put 4 quarters together though. You can't just do it for a quarter here, a quarter there, half here, half there. I think we heard Dabo Swinney talk about that today. And if you do those things, you give yourself a chance to win. If you don't, your chances of winning go down dramatically. I'm not saying they can't win that way. I'm just saying the chances go down dramatically. It's also portal season. Everybody's just chomping at the bit for portal news. You're not going to get a lot. You'll know it when it happens. There is nobody is talking about portal stuff up there, man. They're just not letting that info get out. They don't want it out. They don't want anybody to know what they're doing in the portal. I have a feeling they were probably not happy with the fact that the kid that visited that's on campus right now, that information got out. I would bet anything on it that was something they wanted to keep under wraps. The defensive end for Purdue. Texas A&M is probably the biggest competition for that guy, and you would like to have, if you're going to see something, you probably want to see something, by the end of the day tomorrow. Otherwise, he's going home to think about things and maybe even take more visits. You would like to see Clemson be able to wrap this thing up. So if they're going to land him, I would say you'd probably know in the next 24 to 36 hours. But other than that, you're just not going to get a lot of information, man. They don't want this stuff out there. By the most I've been able to get is the fact that they want to address defensive end. They want to look at linebacker, potentially safety, potentially wide receiver, depending on what happens with the roster after the season ends. You're just going to have to, be patient. But I have been told that they are absolutely serious about adding from the portal, and defensive end is the position they want to address utmost. That is the one. And if you can land this guy that's on campus right now, you got to feel good about that. First one, update on recruiting. Yeah, that's about all I got for you. Like I said a minute ago, I know everybody wants to see all this news and see all these visitors and find out when this guy's going to commit, or are they going to land this guy, who they're going after at this position. That's just not how they're going to operate. The more teams that get involved, the higher the price goes up. They're going to want to keep their involvement, as secretive as possible. And, these guys that put out these graphics that's got 15, 20 schools on there that they say they've heard of, be wary of those things. That's probably a guy Clemson's not really going after. Contact's a very subjective word. It can mean a lot. It can mean something different to one person and than it does the next. I would just be very wary. Like there was a kid that put out one the other night, and I forgot his name, Giovanni something, I think. He's probably had 20 teams on there, and he's got Clemson on there, and that's probably not a guy Clemson's going to target in the portal. Contact can mean a lot of different things. Just the biggest thing I'll tell you, and you're not going to want to hear it, is that you're just going to have to be patient, man, because it's just not something they're doing. Or it's something they're trying to do their best to keep kind of under wraps, and they want to do it in the dark, so to speak. Is Adam leaving? I can't answer that for you either. I would definitely say he's a guy I would keep an eye on. I think there are a couple receivers in that room that I would keep an eye on. Randall being one, Cole Turner being one, Tink Kelly maybe being one. I mean, I'm just saying those are names that I would keep an eye on. When you have two freshmen come in and kind of pass everybody by, you're going to have guys that probably look at leaving. And maybe there's a guy or two that is thinking about leaving and they end up talking into staying. You've already lost 2 receivers. You don't want to lose anymore, because then you start getting short on bodies. Um, you don't want to get under that number of 9. Clemson likes to carry, 10 used to be the number. Sometimes they had 9, sometimes they had 10. But you don't want to get under that number of 9 for sure. Then you start getting thin. We'll see if they can. We'll see if they decide to address that position in the portal. A lot of that might hinge on what Antonio decides to do. I could easily see him heading off into the NFL, and that would be a massive hit for that room because he's kind of this, the guy when you need to play more often than not. That's who they're looking for. So, and you got to keep in mind that for all these teams in the playoff, players get extra time in the window. They don't have to be in at the end of that window. It gets extended, if I'm remembering that right. So they got a little bit extra time to decide. The way this thing's set up this year is crazy. You got early signing day, and then the portal opens up right after the early signing period ends. And the portal opens up before the first playoff games they're played. It's insane. I get it. The kids want to be, enrolled at their new school by January, but they got to do something about this calendar, man. It is insane right now. Outlaw says he is sensing a Clemson win the closer it gets. I think this is a game Clemson can win. I don't have to turn a prediction in towards the end of the week, so I'm not going out on that limb just yet. I absolutely have no idea how that prediction's gonna play out. I remember one that I did. Matter of fact, it was the SMU game. When I started writing it, I had no idea how I was going to end it. And I kept writing it. And by the time I got to the end of it, I picked Clemson to win. I think by 3, maybe. But sometimes I don't decide until I have to write the last sentence of the story. And I get the benefit of having a few more days. But do I think Clemson can win? Yeah, I absolutely do. You get a motivated Cade Klubnik, who's probably pretty motivated going back home. Heck, you talking about a guy who's been one of the – if you just look at the numbers, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in the country this year, and he's not even – he's not first team ACC. He's not second team All ACC. He's not third team All ACC. He's an honorable mention. I mean, what a big time snub. He's probably going to be motivated again. He's going back home, facing off with Quinn Ewers again. Their history in the Texas high school state title game before they got to college, game that Klubnik's Westlake team won handily. There's no shortage of storylines and no shortage of reasons to be motivated. So, do I think Clemson can win? Absolutely. I'm just not going as far as picking them yet. But that don't mean I'm picking Texas either. I'm still undecided at this point. My thoughts on the irony of Dabo challenging the reporters today on their faith in the backup running backs when the coaching staff clearly don't trust them based on lack of playing time. I don't read a whole lot into that, man. I mean, I don't know what else you expect him to say. He's not going to, Dabo's never been one that just goes out there and throws a player under the bus, especially a young guy that's still developing. It's just not in his nature. It's not who he is. Have there been times here and there where he's called some guys out for mistakes and stuff? Sure. But in in this instance here, this kind of scenario, I don't know what else you expect him to say. It's hard to move a player from receiver to running back when you've got less than 2 weeks to prepare. If you're talking about a guy that's never played running back, you got who you got. I kind of see what he means when he says, this is the reason we recruited these guys here. But I also understand why those guys like a guy like Adams or Green haven't seen much time this year. And he's redshirting. So that's, I've heard two of those guys have had, or I've heard one of those guys have had some fumbling issues. Heck, I heard Haynes had some fumbling issues in practice. I don't know what else he's supposed to say there. Sometimes you got to stick up for your guys in public, no matter what you believe behind closed doors. And I don't think that it's the fact that he doesn't have faith in them. I just don't think they've earned the trust yet. I get where you can say that's the same thing, but you're talking about, you're talking about Green, who's a redshirt freshman. You're talking about EZ, who is redshirting because he's a true freshman. Those are two very young backs who they brought in to develop, not to play right away. And they are still trying to develop them. I guess Adams has been there a little bit longer, but, he's not a guy I ever saw as the featured back. I could see him in a situational role, which is kind of looked like earlier in the year is how they wanted to use him. And then as the years gone on, we've seen less and less of him. I just think they're in a tough spot. And, I think he answered it probably the best way he knew how. What has to happen for Clemson to leave Austin on Saturday with the win? First thing I would say is win the turnover battle. Protect the football and create a couple of turnovers. And more often than not, if you can do that, you're probably going to come out on the right side. Didn't work out that way against South Carolina, but there's exceptions to every rule. It'd be nice if Clemson was able to run the ball, but I'm not sure they'd been able to even with a healthy Moff. I mean, Texas has been that good against the run for the most part. There's been, there's been some exceptions here and there. There's been a couple of teams that's had some success, but I think Clemson's offensive line has been much better pass blocking than run blocking this year against the better defenses anyways. But I think, what has to happen is first you win the turnover margin, protect the football, and Cade's going to have to, take some of the pressure off Maffa and make some things happen with his legs. I think he needs a minimum of 15 carries. Probably needs to rush for at least 50 yards. And those receivers are going to have to win one-on-one battles on the outside. They're going to have some opportunities with some man-on-man coverage, and they need to win those battles. Thought he did a good job of that for a lot of the games last Saturday against SMU. I thought they did. I thought they did okay against South Carolina. They're much better now than they were against Louisville that night. Louisville just kind of owned them. Those receivers that night. I thought they've gotten better since. I thought they've been better since. And on the defensive side of the ball, you can't get it run down your throat. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to hold that running game in check and make yours kind of beat you with his arm. I think the biggest thing is they're going to have to get after him. He's not the most mobile of guys to begin with, and I don't think he's fully healthy either. So you're going to have to find ways to get after him and put some pressure on him and keep him in the pocket. You got to contain something they've struggled with. So if you can kind of limit the running game, put the heat on yours and keep him in the pocket, and on the other side, protect the football and get Cade's legs going, you do those things. I kind of like Clemson's chances here. Transfer portal is open. A lot of guys already off the board. We need to start recruiting these dudes like the edge from Georgia. Would be a huge kit along with some wide receiver. Again, man, all I can tell you is you need to be patient. Just because you see a guy in the portal, don't mean that it's a guy Clemson needs to go after. We're not quite there to the revenue shared part yet. That doesn't start till July. I know they've got a little bit of money they can spend in the portal, this offseason. But you can't just go spend it all on one player. You gotta be smart with it. It's not like you got unlimited funds. I would definitely agree. Defensive end is the top priority in my eyes. But the kid you're talking about from Georgia is probably not who when I'm looking at potential targets. That's probably not a guy I'm looking at. You look at a guy like the health guy that's on campus now, or somebody from maybe like Kennard that South Carolina ended up bringing in. They got him from Georgia Tech. I don't think you're going to see them bringing in somebody from Georgia or Alabama or one of the elite schools. You're talking about guys that are going to be looking for huge paydays. And I don't know that Clemson can afford those guys. They got to be smart in how they do it. And, yeah, you're seeing a lot of guys already off the board. A lot of those guys already knew where they were going before they went into the portal. And a lot of the schools that you're seeing very active in the portal right now, taking commitments already, those are schools that have a lot of spots to fill. Clemson doesn't. If you count up right now, depending on, if you're counting a guy or two that got a guy, if you're counting a walk-on or two that they gave scholarships to this year, last year, you're at 84, 85. So they're right on the line. And right now they are operating under the assumption that the rosters are going to expand to 105 next year, but they can't expand. You can't bring those guys on campus now. You can't do that until fall camp. That's when the rosters can't expand. If they even do, I kind of lean towards thinking the ACC might end up following the SEC suit the way, or following what the SEC's done. They're going to stick with 85 next year. So, I mean, there's kind of some things in flux there with what the rosters are going to look like next year. But, again, I would just stress being a little patient. Just because you're not hearing a whole lot doesn't mean they're not actively trying to recruit some guys. Like, I had somebody post in my group the other day that I have on Facebook and I have no idea where it came from, but he was talking about how, it doesn't sound like Clemson's going to recruit the portal to the spring, and that's just not true. I matter of fact, I made a comment under that post. If Clemson can get a guy on campus this weekend, they absolutely will, and turns out they did. It's just because you're not hearing some things you want to hear doesn't mean there aren't things happening. That's about all I can tell you at this point. And you hope they have a little more success than they did last year. And I kind of think they will. I think they had a little bit of a flaw in their way they went about recruiting the portal last year. In my eyes, it looked like they were trying to supplement some of the misses in the 2024 class along the offensive line and, try to supplement those misses in the portal and bring in guys that's got some eligibility left, multiple years, guys that maybe weren't quite ready to start at Clemson this year, guys they could finish developing, but the guys they targeted, really all but one, those guys were looking for starting roles. One of the ones they wanted the most ended up being a key starter there for Georgia Tech. And they said, and it looks like the philosophy is a little bit different because obviously at the end, you need a guy that can come in and play right now. You're not looking for somebody that's going to come in and sit, finish developing. But I wholeheartedly believe Clemson's going to take at least a couple of transfers, before next season. It's just a matter of how it plays out and when it happens. Dabo always answers questions and talks in public like he's talking to his team. His words target players first, not reporters or fans. That tends to be true about 95% of the time. Absolutely. That's I say. I just don't know how he could any other way he could have answered that question. He's not going to come out and tell you, "Hey, man, we don't trust these guys yet. We don't have no faith in them," or it's just not something he does, and he's not going to do it publicly. Assuming they don't want these visits out because they don't want current kids leaving. Kids are going to leave regardless of who you bring in, more often than not. There's nobody in that building that doesn't know Clemson's looking for a defensive end already. I think the biggest reason why they like to keep it quiet is, the more of, even though Clemson's kind of taken a step back the last few years and lost 3 games this year, 4 last year, 3 the year before, they're still seen as a nationally relevant brand that name recognition carries a lot of weight. The more of those type of programs that get involved and start going after a kid, the higher the price goes up. And I think Clemson's trying to go into this thing and land a couple guys and not have to overspend. I don't think they mind, paying a fair market value, but I don't think they want to, you don't want to go in and overspend on a guy and it end up costing you twice as much as you were hoping it would. That's the ones you're going to lose. So if you kind of keep it out the public eye, maybe you kind of temper some of those bidding wars. It just depends on the guy. But that's just the way they like to do it. Teams that stockpile QBs who are good enough to start are learning they won't stay. Take that year one money and run. Absolutely, man. I've probably been asked 6 times today already, is Clemson going to make a run at Aaron Nolan? No. Number one, Clemson's not in the market for a quarterback. They really like Vizina. I know what Klubnik said today, but if you listen to Dabo Swinney the last month, he sounds 100% confident that Klubnik's coming back. If he doesn't, you got a problem then. Make no mistake, you got a problem at that point. But if Klubnik comes back another year and Vizina stays, which I'm told he is staying no matter what happens, you're in pretty good shape quarterback-wise. You don't need to go to the portal. You got the Denson kid coming in who looks like he's got a lot of talent to work with. He's going to need some time, but he's got a lot of potential. And then the next class, you got this Tate Reynolds kid coming in who Garrett Riley loves. He's big, not necessarily tall, big, but he's big. He is fast. He's a true dual threat guy. He took major strides as a junior this year, won a bunch of Player of the Year awards out there in Arizona. They don't really have the need for a quarterback. Again, just because there's a good player in the portal doesn't necessarily mean Clemson needs to go after him. Nolan's the type of guy that's going to carry probably a nice little price tag. Why you want to spend that money on a quarterback when it could be put to much better use on a position where you have a much bigger need? That's kind of how I look at that. But yeah, there's a lot of quarterbacks that, it's going to be harder to stack quarterbacks now. I talked about it on here many times how, during the season, if Cade came back, I thought it was worth keeping an eye on whether Vizina stuck around. Sounds like because not many guys would in that same position. You're not going to find many quarterbacks out there in today's college football that are willing to sit for 3 years. Sounds like Vizina is. Sounds like he's content to do that and let Cade finish out his career, next year, assuming he comes back. And he's going to be fine to take over and have his 2 years after that. But that's a rarity anymore. Man, these quarterbacks are moving around year after year after year after year. And to me, that's the kind of guy you want to stay away from. If he's just going to leave you a year from now, to me, that's the kind of guy to stay away from. But yeah, it's absolutely getting harder stockpiling for sure. They even reach out to Jeremiah Trotter's brother. He's already off the board. Not that I'm aware of. I think linebacker's a spot they could look at. But we're talking about a kid here that already didn't. There was a reason he didn't go to Clemson and chose to go, where he went. You got Wood-Ass coming back next year. You got Sammy coming back next year. But really, after that, there's a lot of questions. Nobody knows what you have in Kobe McLeod. We just haven't seen a lot of him. And then after that, there's really not much there. You got Jamal Anderson, who's kind of undersized and probably, right now better suited to play like a Sam role, which Clemson rarely utilizes anymore. And you got the Logan Anderson kid that's coming in, but he just tore ACL right at the end of his high school season. He can guarantee he's probably going to redshirt next season. But with Trotter, I just don't know that's a guy you're going to land. That there was a reason he didn't come to Clemson to begin with, and I don't know that reason's changed. How healthy are we on defense and offense going into this week? Probably as healthy as you've been in quite some time, outside of running back there with Moffa and Haynes. Those two offensive linemen that were banged up there at the end of the season, they've looked good to go the last couple of games. You got Capehart, who ended up playing a few more snaps in the ACC championship game than he did against South Carolina, I think. So they've been able to use him situationally. Now he's had a couple more weeks. Not 100% sure about Trey Williams, but everybody else, I think is good to go. I think your biggest issues are at running back. You got what you got. There's no practice squad you can go sign somebody from. And, I know there's been a lot of people talking about moving Adam Randall to running back. I don't know how realistic that is in 2 weeks. There's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, Dabo talked about this earlier today too. There's probably no team that's fully healthy right now. This deep into the season, probably everybody's banged up here or there somewhere or another. But, I think Clemson's probably in a pretty good spot overall, health-wise, unless I'm just forgetting somebody. Any scenario or situation where a player can transfer to Clemson and be able to play in the playoffs? No. They have to be enrolled by January. And they can participate in spring practice and go through the spring, but they can't play in any games this season. Contact probably means their agent sent an email, got a thank you response. It very well could be. There's no telling what contact means to some of these players. It absolutely could mean, hey, my agent reached out to Clemson and they answered. Heck, who knows? They might see, let's say, you're a linebacker and Mickey Collins following you on Twitter. Oh, Clemson's contacted me. It can mean all kinds of things, man. In this instance, this specific thing we're talking about here with portal recruiting, it's a very subjective word that could carry, a wide range of meanings. So Clemson have a GM that is in charge of portal recruiting, or is the high school recruiting coordinator in charge of the portal as well? Right now, Jordan Soils is the general manager, and he kind of oversees all of the recruiting. I know they've got, golly, I'm forgetting his name off the top of my head, the former tight ends coach who they moved, from a on-field position to kind of being over the portal. He's the portal scout or whatever. Pearman, Danny Pearman. No, is that right? Yeah, Pearman. But it's Jordan Soils who is serving in that role. And in my opinion, George Soils has been great, running that department and overseeing the recruiting stuff. But I don't know how qualified he is to be a GM, and in charge of salary caps and, managing a roster and salaries and those kind of things. Clemson has hired a firm to oversee that kind of stuff. And so it sounds like some of that responsibility is going to come off of him. You would hope, and I think it does, but you would hope that would mean that they are going to put somebody in that role and let Jordan go back to doing what he's been doing. Is it you know what? I have to look right fast. Let's see if it's in this here, because I'm not sure the answer to that question. Not really. The officials, regardless of conference affiliation, have been so bad this year. I'm not sure it really matters. Trying to see if this is right here in these game notes, and I don't see it right here off the top. No, don't see it in here, but I'm not sure which is probably, seeing that it's the playoff, I'm assuming that it's going to be a crew from a different league that Clemson and Texas is not associated with. That's usually how they do the playoffs. Goodwin have to plan for a possible Arch Manning playing a series or two on third and short. Well, if he doesn't, that would equate to incompetence, in my opinion. So you better, because you're probably going to see him at some point or another in some situation. Kind of lose everyone to Belichick. I am probably in the minority here, but I am of the opinion, I know my colleagues don't think this way, but are the ones, that I work with. But I am of the opinion that Belichick in North Carolina is not going to end well. I'm not saying that he's not going to have any success at all there. I could absolutely see him having some immediate success and winning some games. But there's already been some infighting there at North Carolina over this hire. Now, the people that wanted Belichick won out here. Make no mistake, they've promised all this money for NIL. There's NIL promises made every day that don't get kept. Let's throw that out there. But there are people, in the administration at North Carolina, probably that still sit on the board there at North Carolina, that are firmly entrenched in that Carolina way kind of thinking, where basketball is always going to be king. And how is Belichick going to feel being number two, playing second fiddle to basketball? And it's, I get it. They're making all these promises to him, and a lot of those were demands that he made in order to accept the job, and they said they'd do a lot of them. But it's one thing to say you're going to do it, and it's another thing to actually be able to follow through and do it. I just think there are too many people there in Chapel Hill pulling in different directions that this thing's not going to end well. Now, having said all that, if you could get everybody on that board and in that administration and everybody all aligned and pulling in the same direction and all fighting for the same goal, North Carolina's a sleeping giant. I mean, let's be honest. They've got, they got bukus of money. They won't ever lack for that. But I just don't know that you're going to get everybody on board with buying into football being king when basketball has been for so long. We'll see how it goes, though. Listen to an analyst today saying our O-line will not be able to protect Cade against Texas's D-line. I think they've done a pretty good job of protecting him all season, to be quite honest. And, they played some pretty stout defensive fronts. South Carolina's front might be better than Texas. And I thought they protected him pretty well that day. I thought Garrett had schemed up a nice game plan, and I thought the offensive line protected him. That's something that I think they'll do. I don't see Cade running for his life all day long. I think that South Carolina defensive front probably one of the better ones in the country. I think Georgia's is pretty dang good. And even though you got boat raced in the second half of that game, the offensive line still pass protected pretty well that day. And they've made a lot of improvements since then. So that is, if I got some concerns about this game, it's not in Clemson's pass protection. I can see Clemson win if they quit taking the foot off the gas. Yeah, see, I don't think that's been, I think they got a little conservative against South Carolina. I don't think they did that against SMU. I don't think taking the foot off the gas was the problem. They threw the ball almost twice as many times in the second half as they did run it. I just think it's more about execution. And I thought SMU, we talked about this last week, I thought SMU's DBs played much better in the second half. They batted some balls down. I don't think it was Clemson taking their foot off the gas. But again, having said that, I did think they got a little conservative against South Carolina in that second half. Just say it. Dabo not going to be honest and transparent with fans. I don't know many head coaches that are that honest and transparent. It's all coach speak. That's what all of them do. I don't know why people expect Dabo to be different. Clawson leaving Wake Forest and moving into what I call a holding position, not unemployed, but a role he can vacate as soon as he wants. I think it's just it makes me wonder if Wake Forest is going to go all in on the rev share. Clawson is already his program is already kind of serving as a minor league, team for some of these bigger programs. We see it every year. He gets these kids in there. They develop under him a couple of years, and then they get poached by some bigger program with more money. We see it every year. I think we just saw one of their offensive linemen commit to South Carolina yesterday or today. At a certain point, you say enough's enough. We've kind of hit the ceiling here, and especially, I don't remember seeing anything. Excuse me. Seen anything where the administration at Wake said they're going to go all in on this rev share thing. Maybe that plays a part here. Um, but I think they're losing a heck of a coach. I think the sport's losing a heck of a coach. Just like I think they lost one with Nick Saban. I think basketball lost one with Tony Bennett. And there's going to be more examples, man, because there's roster management right now is impossible, man. Just think about being in Dave Clawson's shoes. You got no money to work with, during this NIL era, or let's just say very little money to work with. Any good player you get, or even a mid-level player that you get out of high school, bring in, develop him into a really good player. Somebody's just going to take him when he's a sophomore or at a junior at the latest. That's got to be frustrating as all get out. And, I can understand it. I can understand it, absolutely. Kind of sucks. Trotter's little brother went to Mizzou. It also kind of, I think it also kind of speaks volumes, how quickly it played out. I think he probably already knew where he was going before he went in. And Missouri is a team that's been throwing around a lot of money. Adam Randall, now the first team kick return guy. Yeah, I kind of like him in that role. We'll see if he does anything more than fair catch him out there this weekend. I haven't really. I got to start watching a few more Texas games here in the next couple of days. I've only seen a couple so far. But yeah, I'm kind of interested to see how he performs in that role. He's a big guy. He doesn't like have elite level speed, and I fully believe that those, the knee injuries have kind of impacted the speed he did have, but he never had elite level speed. But he showed the other night he's absolutely capable of doing it. Dabo is basically saying we like who we got, but they never see the field. What does that really mean? Well, I mean, you got to, like I've said a few times now, last year everybody's just screaming, man, they want to see more Maffa. And now that he had the job, everybody's screaming they want to see the other guys. I don't think it's that they don't like them. I just think that they're young and not fully developed and have not fully earned the trust of the staff. We're talking about third, fourth, and fifth string guys. They are third, fourth, and fifth string guys for a reason. There's a reason they're that far down the depth chart. And there's a reason why we saw Maffa so much more than anybody else over Haynes. I mean, you're talking about a running back room that's full of underclassmen outside of Maffa. There's two or three guys in there that are probably nowhere close to being what they're gonna be before they leave Clemson. I think he's got an extremely high ceiling. I think Jarvis can probably be a serviceable back. I don't know about it at the level Clemson wants to play at, but somewhere. I even think there's a role that Adams could carve out for himself situationally. But Haynes and Maffa are the guys that they wanted to kind of step up and be the dudes this year, and now both of them are hurt. But when they were healthy, that's why you hadn't seen the other guys, because they hadn't needed them. You get to see some of them in garbage time. I mean, I don't know. I don't know any other way to answer that one. Now, again, we're talking about a true freshman in Azuiume, talking about a redshirt freshman in Jarvis Green, and I think Adams is he's a redshirt sophomore. Maybe they're all three underclassmen. Running back's a hard position to learn, and two of those guys, I'm not even sure I don't think they are starting caliber Power 5 backs. So, yeah, again, you got what you got. And it's a position that's been ravaged by injury. always see where Clemson is in the top 10 in NIL money because you're reading numbers that are not accurate. So why are we always losing players to money? I get not guaranteed money before they made a play, but we can't keep these star players if they see money is coming. The numbers you are seeing are not accurate, especially Brad Crawford posted something on Twitter the other day, and everybody took it as gospel. It was this firm that they were estimates. They came up with these estimates based off what the booster club raises every year, and they're nowhere near accurate. Those are figures that these collectives are not going to release willy-nilly that way. So there's the answer to that. They are not top 10 in NIL money. Nowhere even close to being in the top 10, on a year-to-year basis. South Carolina, right now, they have more NIL money than Clemson does. They are, as a matter of fact, I've been told they got more money than they ever have. That's just kind of where Clemson is. I do think, and I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I do think Clemson could be better than what they have been as far as raising NIL money. I don't think everybody's on the same page up there. It's kind of like what I was talking about in North Carolina earlier. Don't think everybody's pulling in the same direction. And I don't think the collective, not just the collective, but, even with Dabo, I don't think the messaging's been what it needs to be. Half this fan base, not necessarily talking to you, but there are a lot of people in this fan base that still don't even know how NIL works. I see people every day talking about, they can take money from Dabo's salary and use it for NIL. Take money from IPTAY and use it for NIL. You can't. That's not how it works. You can't do that. It's almost kind of gotten comical, in my opinion, how uneducated the Clemson fan base is on NIL, and it's not their fault. It's because the messaging is sucked. I think the school, I think IPTAY, I think the 110 Society, I think the administration, I think they all could have been better about this. I think there is a lot of untapped meat out there, when it comes to raising NIL funds for Clemson. It's just a matter if they're going to, get a fire lit under their rear end and do it. I know the rev share stuff starting next year, and that's going to help. There's supposed to be guardrails put on NIL starting next year, but we'll see. Either way, NIL is not going away. You're still going to have it. You're still going to have to raise it. We'll see what happens, But so far, I think Clemson's failed miserably in this area. And again, I'm not saying they're broke, because they're absolutely not. I mean, they've got money to work with, but they're nowhere near the top 10 in the country. And they probably never will be. Small alumni base, but I will say this: IPTAY is arguably the best booster club in the nation. They raise tens and tens of millions of dollars a year. If your booster club can do it, your collective should be able to do it. There's got to be a way to make it work. Clemson's just not found it yet. Don't want to see a three-man front at all Saturday. It just depends on the situation. I like seeing Clemson play out of the base 4-3, depending on who they're playing. Obviously, if you got a team that's running five wides out there, you can't play 4-3. But if it's third and long, or something, I don't mind about the three-man front. Clemson used a lot of three-man front in the first half against, not a lot, but they were using some three-man front in the first half against SMU and still getting pressure. It just depends. Just depends on the situation and point of the game, down and distance, those things. But, I'd much rather see them in a 4-3 base when the opportunity presents itself. But but I'm not going to go as far as saying I don't want to see a 3-man front at all. I think there are times when it's called for, and then there's times when it's not. What do you think about Noble Johnson going to Arizona State, who Clemson will play if they beat Texas? You think that could hurt Clemson? Nah, I think there's more being made that than there should be. There's ways to curtail that kind of stuff. It's not like Clemson's never played against a former player before. I mean, Andrew Makuba, he's been inside that building for a couple years. He's on the Texas team right now. I mean, there are things you can change and terminology and stuff, but having the helmet-to-helmet communication, as long as you can the biggest thing to me is just making sure there's no way they can pick up on some tendencies. You got to be able to mask your tendencies, and good coaches are able to do that. If you can do that, I think you'll be fine. All right, last one I want to answer about this one. They're both hurt, so if you like the other guys too, why won't he play them? Just because he likes them doesn't mean that he necessarily trusts them yet. When you say I like who we have, that don't mean I like them to go out and rush for 100 yards tomorrow. It could mean I like who they're going to be next year or the year after. Again, there is a reason EZ's redshirting. If he was close to being the best back on the team, he'd be playing. Again, go back and watch what Adams did in the ACC championship game. It was one of the most boneheaded things I've ever seen. There's a reason that those guys haven't played a lot, because they have not earned the trust of the staff. This staff believes that a banged-up Maffa gives them the better opportunity than those guys. Doesn't mean he doesn't like them. Just means they haven't earned the trust yet. They're still in the progress of developing as players. Again, I think we've gotten to a point where if a guy isn't making an impact as a true freshman or a redshirt freshman, he's some kind of bum or bust. And I think we've lost sight in the fact that it takes each player develops at his own pace. Again, I think two of the guys in Clemson's running back room probably aren't even starting caliber at the Power 5 level. But you have who you have, and I think they believe a banged-up Maffa, that's who they trust more than those other guys. You want to run out a true freshman out there who can't protect the quarterback's blind side? You want to run somebody out there that has fumbling issues in practice? You want to run somebody out there that calls for a fair catch and then don't even attempt to catch the ball? I mean, it's all about trust. And it doesn't mean he doesn't like them as players. It just means they're not there yet, that they still need more time. Yep. DJ has declared for the draft, and this is going to sound mean, and I don't mean it to, but that should tell you about what kind of options he had at the college level for next year. They must not have been many, and seeing as he had already said he was planning to go back to Florida State, I'm going to go out on a limb here and guess they told him, thanks, but no thanks. We appreciate all your hard work, effort, but we're ready to move on. Jalen Lay has declared for the draft to talk about. I think he had less than 20 career catches, if I'm remembering right. I think he's been in college 5 years now. Talk about a guy who, when he got to campus, man, he just has all this potential, and it just hasn't played out that way. With his size, who knows? He's liable to get a chance. I mean, he's probably not going to get drafted, but he's probably going to get opportunity somewhere. We'll see if he can make the most of it. Dabo does seem sure Cade is coming back. Do I think Vizina? Yeah, I touched on this earlier. Cade was actually asked about coming back earlier today in his presser, and he said that's something he does not ready to talk about yet. But yeah, Dabo has been very confident in the fact that Cade's coming back. So that tells me Cade's coming back. I mean, I guess, depending on what happens between now and the rest of the way, I guess let's say by some miracle Clemson balls out and wins a few games or runs the table and wins it all. Maybe things change, but so far Dabo sound pretty confident. But I have been told that Vizina's staying either way. Earlier in the year, I did think that was a concern. Would Vizina be willing to sit another year? But based on what I've been told, he sounds like he is. So he is he's one of those rare quarterbacks these days. Not many are willing to do that anymore. Now, this I 100% agree with you. You got to be able to run the ball a little bit. You got to make the opposing defense at least respect it. I do think Maffa's been running a little tentative the past 2-3 games, whatever it's been. Based on what I've heard, it's something he's been dealing with all year, but it's gotten worse as the season has progressed. And it's gotten really bad, right here at the end of the season. He needs surgery on it. It's not good. Rest isn't going to do it. No amount of rest will. It's got to be surgically repaired. But yeah, you're going to have to get creative. We're going to see exactly, what Garrett Riley's made of in this game, because you're not just going to be able to hand the ball off to Moffa 15, 20 times. I think you're going to have to get Cade involved. You might have to find a way to, get the screen game going to try to soften that defense up, get them running sideline to sideline. And it's not an area Clemson's really excelled at in this year. They've been better than they were last year, but they're still not excelling in that department. So they're going to have to get creative with some of the things they have to do, because they definitely, you can't go out there and be one-dimensional, that's for sure. Personally, I'm hoping that they've taken the time these past 2 weeks to get that true freshman as ready as possible. That guy's, all we really have to go on right now at this point is his high school film, and his high school film's impressive. He can move. He runs like a 10.89 100, or he did in high school. So he's got some wheels. He'd be a home run threat every time he touches the ball. But again, he is a guy I've heard's had some fumbling issues in practice. So maybe that's gives you some pause. But if it's me, I'm getting that guy ready for his opportunity. Never should have started this. It's sad. I noticed so many left, and only two that is playing are playing good. We will play against. Okay, I think Dorinda's talking about the transfer portal. Dabo knows how he wants to coach, and I'm with Dabo. I want guys that want to play for Clemson. Yeah, I get the frustration with the portal. I would like to see them kind of move towards a more, now that you've kind of opened this thing up, move more towards a more professional level and add some contracts to this thing where because right now the schools have no leverage. The inmates are kind of running the asylum. The players have all the power. They can move from team to team, year to. You can't even do that in the NFL or the NBA or Major League Baseball. You have to sign a contract, and right now these guys don't have to do that. That's something I would like to see implemented to kind of, rein a little bit of this in. But on the other hand, on the other side of that, we are here because the NCAA has tried to hang on to this archaic, amateurism deal. And, college football has not been an amateurism for a long time. these are full-time jobs to these guys. They don't have the opportunity to go out and get part-time jobs or full-time jobs on the side, while they play football like you could do back in the 80s or the 90s. Those guys are in that facility every day. A lot of them from sun up to sundown. If they're not on the practice field, they're in the weight room, in the film room. It's a full-time job. And the NCAA has been trying to say for years they're amateurs. They can't make money off their own name, no endorsement deals, yada, yada, yada. And if they'd have just given an inch a decade ago and said, yeah, okay, you know what? We're going to allow you to go out and sign endorsement deals. If your name is valuable enough that where somebody wants to pay you to endorse their product, we're going to allow that. But instead, they kept pushing back and pushing back and pushing back, and they got sued, and they got sued again, and they got sued again and sued again, and they lost them all. One of those suits went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they got punked. Clemson has added a wide receiver out of the portal. Tristan Smith out of Southeast Missouri has announced he will transfer to Clemson. 76 catches for 934 yards and 6 touchdowns last season. All the Dabo hates the portal talk can now stop. I got my thought got interrupted there. Sorry, Dorinda. I was starting to get off on a tangent anyways. My wife and I are in Houston and both have the flu, but not COVID. We're up to date on all the vaccines, so informed to team to eat their veggies and coffee. My wife's just getting over the flu too. Hers just turned into bronchitis, actually. I got somebody down here saying avoid coughing people and don't eat them. Well, yeah, there's definitely something going around, man. We've had to kind of quarantine her. My oldest daughter, man, she ain't about. If somebody gets sick, you get in quarantine in the back of the house, and you better don't bring yourself out, because she ain't about all that. And I told my wife she better keep that to herself. I got places to be this weekend, and ain't no flu getting in the way of that. How about Tyler Brown? He's on back at practice, if that's what you're asking me. I think he played 4 snaps against SMU. Listening to Dabo talk today, it just doesn't sound like he's a guy they're going to lean heavily on. Unless maybe somebody gets hurt. I just think they're going to roll with, for the most part, you're going to see Antonio, Wesco, TJ Moore, with a little bit of Turner and maybe some Adam Randall mixed in. We'll see if his snap count goes up this week. But he's probably a guy that's got to knock the rust off anyways. He hadn't played since Florida State, really. And, he really hasn't played much all season. He got nicked up in the Georgia game, didn't play a whole lot then. I don't think he played much against App State. I want to say he might have played. Let's see. I got the snaps right here, matter of fact. Yeah, he played 26 against Georgia. That was the game he got hurt in to begin with. And he only played 5 against App State. He didn't play at all against North Carolina State. Wait a minute. Yeah, he didn't play at all against North Carolina State. Then only 22 against Stanford and only 17 against Florida State. So he's only played 74 snaps all season. That's not a lot for a receiver. It's good to know you got that guy there if you need him. Absolutely. CV should go elsewhere. Can you think of an example where a 4 or 5-star rated quarterback came in and sat for 3 years and finally got his chance to start in the 4th year? Not lately. Not off the top of my head. I mean, it used to happen, before the portal came along. But yeah, that's why I've said he's kind of the exception to the rule. Sorry. Give me 1 second. I got to answer this. All right. But yeah, he's the exception, man. I have talked to somebody that knows him and is familiar with him, and he likes it at Clemson. He believes in that coaching staff, and he's willing to sit another year. Yeah, but you're right. It does not happen very often anymore. Here you go. A man says it's going to be a Big Ten crew. Oh, Curtis is spewing some basketball. Clemson travels to South Carolina tomorrow night. Coming off that tough loss to Memphis, Clemson plays South Carolina. Tomorrow night, Columbia. Definitely don't want to drop back-to-back games. It wouldn't be the end of the world. But that's a team that Clemson should win. That's a game Clemson should win. No, it's unrealistic, but Travis Shaw from UNC entered the portal, and he was someone we pursued in high school. I know we had crazy depth defensive tackle. I don't think so. It's kind of like what I was talking about with quarterback earlier. You got other positions, and again, Clemson's landed a wide receiver out of the portal. Since we've been on here, you've got other positions of much higher need. I don't think you want to use your. I don't think you want to go and spend money on a player at a position of lesser need. I just think you've got let's just say I think you got bigger needs on your roster at other positions than you do at defensive tackle. I think you're still set up, assuming nobody leaves. I think you're still set up pretty well there for the next year or two. Got to still keep recruiting it well to keep that up, but that is one area they have recruited well. There's been some other positions where it's fallen off, but it's kind of stayed pretty level at defensive tackle. Yeah, this is kind of what I lean towards, more so than saying the offense took the foot off the gas or got conservative against SMU. And in some of those other games too, again, I think they did get a little conservative against South Carolina, but some of these other games before that, I don't think they got as conservative as some people make out. I just think they have failed to execute. You're always going to be able to question this play call or that play call. But overall, I think it's more about execution than it is about taking the foot off the gas. And, you got to execute at the same level in the fourth quarter as you were in the first quarter. Oh, I like this one. Why in the world did Westside take the ball out of Wood's hands on 2-point conversion against South Florence Friday? If you go back and watch that play, you know what? At first, I hated the play call, but the more I thought about it, the more I've liked it. Woods was wide open. The kid that the target in the end zone, he was open, man. The South Florence kid just made a play and got a hand on the ball. I mean, it was open. You can't ask for more than that. Sometimes the other team just makes a play. I love the idea of going for two there. Neither one of those defenses were stopping the other offense. I mean, that was one hell of a football game, man. If you look at the final box score, I think South Florence possessed the ball for like 39 minutes, and Westside had it for less than 10. It was insane. Woods completed 11 passes. They went for more than 400 yards. I think those DBs are still chasing Bomar around out there somewhere. But for that reason, and I think, somebody told me that Coach Marlowe said after the game that if he was in the same position, he would have went for two for the same reason, especially because as fast as Westside was scoring. But if Westside converts there, man, that game's over because South Florence had not, it's probably over anyways. Still only about 2 minutes left, and South Florence has got that slow, methodical offense that just runs it down your throat and picks up 5, 6, 7 yards at the time. They'd have had to pick up some chunk plays. They had done it a few times, but not a lot. But again, I hated that play call when I first saw it. But then, after I watched the replay a few times, I don't hate it as much now. If the guy just looks back at Cutter, man, he is running all by himself over there. He's going to have to stop and throw back that way. But, man, he was all by himself, and his intended target was sitting right there in the end zone all by himself. It's just one of those South Florence defenders got a hand up on it, man. But I'm going to tell you what, I have learned my lesson. I will never, ever doubt that South Florence coaching staff again. And not that I was doubting them, because I think Marlowe's he might be the best coach in the state. And I've thought that for a long time. But, when they got beat by Hartsville, when they got blew out by Hartsville at home, I think it was at home a few weeks ago in region play, I'm sitting there thinking, man, I just don't think this is their year. But, man, something happened after that. They just started. They beat up their first couple of opponents in the playoffs pretty easily. Then they had to go back to Hartsville. And I didn't give them much of a chance to win after the way they got beat the first time. I should have known better. Man, they went down there and just smacked them Red Foxes. Smacked them in the mouth. And then they went to North Augusta and got down 20-0 all, pretty quick. And that defense don't give up another point the rest of the game, and they win 27-20. But I wasn't giving much of a chance against Westside just because I know they've had some past defense issues at South Florence this year, and I know how prolific that Westside offense is. I saw it firsthand last year, and it's better this year. But, man, I'm going to tell you, that was one heck of a football game, man. I just thought South Florence just owned it at the line of scrimmage, just owned it. Both sides, although we didn't get to see much of South Florence's defensive line. But South Florence's offensive line just totally manhandled Westside. And to me, that was the difference in the game. And I know I'm a member of one of those, I can't remember, it's a Facebook group where they talk about high school sports. It's a huge Facebook group. And I don't post or comment in there, but I see a lot of stuff. And I've seen a lot of the Westside fans, upset about that play call. And, again, I immediately, right there at the beginning, I thought the same thing, man. But the more I watched it and seeing those guys that were open, I don't think it was that terrible of a play call, man. It just wasn't executed. All right. We have run way over again tonight. I said I was not running over tonight, but here we are. All right, here's the deal on your portal wide receiver. It's a guy I never heard of before. See, I'm telling you, this is a guy I hadn't even heard of being a possible or a potential target. That is just how tight-lipped some of this stuff's been, or pretty much all of it. All right, he's from Southeast Missouri State. His name's Tristan Smith. He just finished his junior season, so he's going to have, sounds like, 1 year of eligibility left. 76 catches, 934 yards, and 6 touchdowns this year. He played 2 seasons at a junior college before transferring to Southeast Missouri State before this season. He's 6'5", 205 pounds. Sounds like a pretty good pickup. See, man, and the guy's been on campus today, and nobody knew about it. That's how you do it. I'm heading to Clemson tomorrow night after the South Carolina basketball game, and we will be heading out to Austin Thursday morning. I think the developmental part of the program is suffering because we don't have the luxury of putting the younger guys in the game like we did with Watson and Lawrence. I think the portals kind of hurt your development more so than anything. This year they got a lot of opportunities, especially in the first half of the season, to do what you're talking about here. I think, while Clemson hasn't lost any real legitimate starter outside, really Makuba's the only one to the portal. It's usually backup guys. What it does do is rob you of your depth. Guys that they might not have been starting today, but would have been starting tomorrow or next year. So it keeps Clemson's had to keep replacing them with freshmen, which means you always stay young. To me, that's the biggest area that's hurt Clemson the most. They've been a young team 3-4 years in a row now because they keep losing all their depth to the portal and keep replacing it with freshmen. Hopefully this here's a sign of things are starting to go in a different direction because this is a guy with, a lot of experience. He's played a lot of football. This wide receiver they picked up, and, if you're Clemson, you're hoping you get that defensive end. He's played a lot of football, and he's got 2 years left. You look at Clemson's roster and compare it to South Carolina's roster. South Carolina, I think, had 32 seniors on their roster when they played each other. 32. I think Clemson's got like 9. So to me, that's what's hurting the developmental part is you keep losing the guys you're developing before they're ready to start. And not saying all of them would have started, obviously, but some of them maybe would have, after another year. And you keep having to replace them with freshmen. Where do I think Clemson's ranked at in NIL? There's no way for me to really know that without the numbers. I'd probably say in the top third. That's my best guesstimate. Definitely not in the bottom half or anything like that. The way we talk about it sometimes makes it sound like they're broke. They're not. But they're not rolling into money either. And Dabo's made a decision to use the money so far to this point, anyways, to use a majority of the money they have on keeping the players that they have brought in, and that's why you've not seen them lose very many starters or any starters really outside of Makuba. If you want to count Bo Collins, fine, but we're talking about a guy whose snaps were going to decrease drastically this year, and Clemson probably said, "Hey, want to move on? More power to you." Without much of an effort to keep him, but I would say at worst in the top third. Definitely not top 10. And I'm talking about Power 4 schools now. I'd say probably in the top third somewhere. But yeah, definitely not in the top 10. I think Clemson's had enough money to survive and compete. But I think the administration and the collective and even Dabo could be doing a much better job about getting the word out there and telling exactly what they need, and explaining exactly how NIL works. Because I don't think they've done a very. I mean, I'm not saying they've never come out and said it, but I don't think they've done it enough. Exactly how NIL works and why the fans need to donate and what it's going to go towards, and tell them, hey, if you don't, you can, if you want to donate to a certain sport, you can do that, but you got to donate so much. I don't even know how much that is. Can't find out. I just think that's a problem. Especially when they go out on these, you used to call them the Growl and Prowl tour or whatever every summer, spring or whenever. That would be the perfect opportunity. And I've been to a few of those things, man, and they don't, sometimes they'll talk a little bit about NIL, but it's vague and it's, they're speaking in general. There's not a whole lot of specifics. I just think there needs to be more of a grassroots effort, and it needs to reach out further than just the alums. There are a lot of Clemson fans that did not go to school at Clemson. That is an untapped resource. They need to be exploring all different kinds of avenues of revenue. People aren't going to like it, but they need to start thinking about selling alcohol in the football stadium, which I think is coming. Selling sponsorships, heck, slap a name on the stadium if you got to, some corporate deal. Trying to think of one, Coca-Cola Stadium or Death Valley, sponsored by Coca-Cola. Frank Howard Memorial Field, sponsored by Coca-Cola. Something, anything to try to put some money in those coffers. Any way you can do it and kind of help you bridge the gap with some of these other schools. Correct. Noel Johnson, I don't know. He might be already there. School's already out at Clemson. They've already taken finals. It's kind of like the mid-year enrollees. Some of them are already at Clemson, like the kid from Marlboro County, the Keenan kid. He told me he's been there since last Thursday. Braden Jacobs is going to get there Wednesday. Gideon Davidson and Easton Ware, they were getting there today, I think it was. Amari Adams was going up tomorrow. So, he could be there already. Can't play. But even if he doesn't arrive until January, there's Zoom calls and stuff. He's going to be in contact. But I think that's a much, not nearly the big deal it's been made out to be. Game predictions for the Chickens tomorrow night in hoops. I think Clemson's going to win. Everybody meet Chris Wall. You're probably going to see a baseball show from me and this guy starting sometime in February. So be on the lookout for that. College baseball. I don't know about a score. Give me Clemson 79-72. What point does Dabo save Moffitt from himself? I don't think he's hurting himself with the terrible film or anything, man. The NFL scouts know exactly who he is, what he's dealing with. I don't think that's an issue at all. Again, everybody keeps saying need to give Jarvis Green and David E. a shot, and I understand where you're coming from, but there's a reason that he's not giving Jarvis Green a shot yet. Obviously, there's a very real reason for EZ because he's been redshirting. And if it's me, I'm trying to get that guy as up to speed as possible at this point. But again, man, I've heard that EZ's had some fumbling issues, just like Haynes was having earlier. You got to earn the trust before you get out there on the field. That's just the way it is. And I don't think neither one of those guys have earned it yet. Adams either, for that matter. But we'll see what they do. But I don't think that Moffa's hurting himself, his draft status at all, playing hurt. Who replaces Stellato? Well, Stellato hasn't really played much in the last few weeks. Golly, since Pitt. He wasn't starting. You've seen Antonio play a few more snaps since then. Cole Turner's played some. Can rotate Tyler Brown in there if you need to. I mean, that's something they've already been dealing with. Really don't get all the talk about Dabo not using the portal. There's a difference in landing and using. Yeah, I mean, again, Dabo said for years now if he thought there was a gap in his roster, he'd go try. He'd have no problem using the portal. And I fully believe. I think he's always meant that. Now, his definition of a gap in the roster might be different than what I view as a gap in the roster or what somebody else views as a gap in the roster, but it's obvious he sees a gap or two now. They have absolutely been trying to recruit the portal hard this time, and they've knowing Clemson and the way they go about doing things. I would bet almost anything that they have zeroed in on some specific targets. And again, you're not hearing anything. Again, I haven't heard a peep about this guy being on campus, and he's committed. He's been there. I mean, his Instagram story shows him in a Clemson uniform, so he's there, or he just left, or he's just been there. They're getting these guys in and out without nobody knowing, But yeah, there is a difference between landing and using. And there's a lot of people that say that Clemson they didn't make much of an effort to land those offensive linemen last year. They just did it for show to appease the fan base. Well, that's the biggest bunch of crock, that I don't even know why anybody think they'd go through the effort of all of that, especially a guy like Dabo who really, he's not, he's in the past, he hasn't cared if he's ticked off the fans. He's used to the fans being ticked off at him. I don't think he was going to care if they were still ticked off at him. Just don't think he's going to go through the motions just to appease the fan base. It takes a lot of effort to line those kind of things up and try to get those guys on campus and go after them. And it's just not something I don't think any coaching staff would do. Now, talked about this earlier. You can question the way they went about doing it and the guys they targeted for the roles they wanted them to serve in. I think that's fair game. I think that was a big part of why they didn't land anybody. They didn't need a starter, so they wasn't offering up starting money, and they definitely wasn't guaranteeing nobody a starting job. And when you're going after a guy like Keon Rutledge, who starting at Georgia Tech, but you want him to come in here and finish developing and maybe be a backup for another year, Georgia Tech's probably going to offer him more money in that starting role, and you're not. Guess where he's going? But yeah, I mean, Dabo's not been nearly against the portal as the national media has made out. Does he like it? No. But there's a lot of coaches that don't like it. He's definitely not the only one. No, I don't have any word on the visit from help from Purdue. Last I heard, he was still there, and that is all the information I've been able to get. I'm telling you, there ain't nobody like this receiver Clemson just landed. I saw the other day. I can't remember if it's yesterday, day before. Somebody mentioned him on Twitter, but it was just general conversation, and I haven't heard a peep about that guy. Now he's committed. They have done a fantastic job of keeping this stuff under wraps. Here's your prediction. CV will get more playing time next year and will take over 2026. He'll have a veteran Wesco and more the year he takes over. Definitely in his best interest to stay. Yeah, we'll see, man. We'll see what happens. I fully believe Vizina's got all the tools. Make no mistake, man. He's got a big arm. He's much quicker than he looks for, especially for a guy his size. He's a big dude, man. He's like 6'4", 6'5". He moves around very well, but we'll see what happens after Cade leaves. That'll be about the same time Tate Reynolds arrives, and that guy might have a word to say about who starts in 2026. We'll see. And don't get me wrong, I'm not predicting Tate Reynolds to come in and win the job as a true freshman, but it would absolutely not shock me based off the jump he took from his during his junior season. Man, he's been phenomenal. I can tell you this is true. CV has been all in on Dabo and his culture since high school. Big difference, not just all about the Benjamins. Absolutely. There is he is willing to sit another year, and it's not because he's not being developed or he doesn't think he's ready to play or anything like that. That's how much he loves it at Clemson. And make no mistake, he's had some offers to go elsewhere, and he's had no interest. And if you remember, Vizina committed pretty early in that recruiting cycle, and Clemson had their quarterback very early that year. And there's this kid 10 minutes down the road there by the name of Lenore Sellers who just blew up as a senior, long after Vizina had committed to Clemson and they had their guy. But I digress. Yes, I'm looking forward to baseball season 2. I can tell you Chris Wall's looking forward to baseball season 2. Eric Batch is going to have another strong team, man. Strong. Saw a headline today, Dabo gives in and is using. You're going to see those kind of headlines everywhere. They're good for clicks. All right, I got to wrap this up. Appreciate everybody that's tuned in tonight. Don't let us forget our sponsors. A-Glass, 2 locations right here in the PD, one in Florence, one in Sumter. Give them a call today. Take care of all your auto glass needs, replacement, repair. Get yourself a free quote, myaglass.com. Again, 2 locations, Florence, Sumter. They're right there on South Irby Street in Florence, out there by the Walmart, Carter Road and Sumter. Great sponsors. Oh, my only sponsor. Didn't want another one. Wanted them to have it and put their name on the show, and they'd be the only one on here, and hopefully they stay a long time. Everybody else that's tuned in, I very much appreciate it. Clemson's going to head to Texas this weekend. They are back in the playoff basketball tomorrow night. Rivalry basketball tomorrow night. Clemson, South Carolina. We'll be right back here next Monday to break it all down. Maybe even another portal edition or two. See y'all then.